Today's case explores a tale of betrayal, obsession, and a troubling affair between a wife and her stepson, culminating in a shocking murder. Cheyenne Robards, 29, appeared to lead a life many admired, but few were aware of the challenges she faced beneath the surface. Cheyenne grew up in a struggling neighborhood on Buffalo's east side, facing a childhood filled with challenges. Raised by a single mother, she often went without basic necessities like food and proper shoes, which made financial insecurity a constant burden. Despite these hardships, Cheyenne was determined to rise above her circumstances and build a better life for herself. After high school, Cheyenne relocated to the wealthier Orchard Park area, juggling several jobs to make ends meet. She eventually found her niche as a personal trainer, gaining admiration for her looks, charm, and commitment. Still, the income she earned fell short of supporting the lifestyle she envisioned. To make up for her financial shortfall, Cheyenne secretly became an escort, trading intimate encounters with wealthy clients for money. This side job enabled her to indulge in high-end fashion, luxurious vacations, and a more comfortable lifestyle, which she often showcased on social media. In 2014, she began an affair with Frank Robards, a 48-year-old successful businessman well-connected in the Orchard Park community. Frank's wealth and status provided Cheyenne with the financial stability she had long desired. The couple married in 2015 in a grand ceremony at the Buffalo Club, surrounded by the elite. From the outside, it seemed Cheyenne was living her dream, complete with a beautiful home, luxury cars, and plenty of cash. However, Cheyenne's marriage was anything but perfect. Frank was controlling and emotionally distant, often treating her more like an object than a true partner. The initial attraction faded quickly, leaving Cheyenne feeling trapped in a relationship where wealth did not equate to happiness. It was around this time that Cheyenne began having sex with Frank's son Dustin, who was just 19 years old. Dustin was attracted by Cheyenne's outgoing personality and vibrant, sexy energy. The two began an affair in secret, having sex around the house while Frank was out of town. Dustin, feeling neglected by his father and drawn to Cheyenne's allure, became infatuated with her. For Cheyenne, Dustin represented an exciting escape from her unhappy marriage. In the weeks leading up to her death in September 2015, she was caught in a double life, stuck in a toxic relationship while entangled in a forbidden affair that would ultimately lead to a tragic conclusion. On the morning of September 14, 2015, the Orchard Park police received an urgent call from Frank Robards, 48, who reported finding his wife, Cheyenne, dead in their bedroom. Around 7:30 a.m., Frank returned home from an early conference call, expecting to see Cheyenne preparing for her day. Instead, he was met with a shocking and tragic scene. Cheyenne lay on the floor beside the bed, drenched in blood. She had been violently beaten to death with what investigators later suspected was a blunt object, possibly a hammer. Blood stained the bed, walls, and floor, indicating the attack was chaotic and savage. Frank told the 911 operator that she wasn't breathing and that there had been a break-in. Jewelry and other valuables were strewn across the room, with drawers pulled open, making it seem like a robbery gone wrong, something not unusual in this Rust Belt city. Panicked and out of breath, Frank tried to revive her while still on the phone, but it was already too late. First responders arrived at the Robards' house in minutes, and paramedics quickly confirmed that Cheyenne was dead. One responder later recalled Frank being visibly upset, pacing back and forth while police examined the scene. Although Frank insisted it was a robbery, officers soon noticed details that didn't quite make sense. There were no signs of forced entry, and the scattered belongings looked more staged than genuine. The room wasn't tossed about like in a typical burglary. Instead, it seemed as though someone had deliberately arranged the items to make it look like a robbery had taken place. Frank, still in shock and struggling to answer the detectives' questions clearly, was taken to the police station for more questioning. Meanwhile, officers sealed off the house and began searching for additional evidence. This wasn't just a random burglary. Someone had deliberately wanted Cheyenne dead and took great care to make it seem like something else. When Orchard Park police arrived at the Robards' home on September 14, 2015, they were immediately shocked by the violence of the crime scene. The upscale house, tucked away in a peaceful, well-maintained neighborhood, appeared quiet from the outside, but inside Cheyenne Robards' bedroom, the scene told a far more disturbing story. Blood was splattered on the walls and floor, and Cheyenne's lifeless body lay beside the bed, her skull shattered beyond recognition. Investigators believed she had been beaten to death with a hammer. Lead detective Ivan Henderson and his team quickly picked up on inconsistencies in Frank Robards' story about a supposed break-in. Although jewelry and valuables were scattered, there were no signs of forced entry. The items appeared carefully arranged, as if someone had staged the scene to look like a botched robbery. Drawers were pulled open, but the room wasn't as disordered as you'd expect from an actual burglary. As investigators reconstructed the scene, they uncovered a startling fact: Cheyenne was 3 months pregnant. But a medical examination soon revealed another unexpected detail. The baby was not Frank's, raising serious questions about who the father could be and adding complexity to the case. The police now had to explore a more personal motive for the murder. Cheyenne had suffered a brutal attack, with multiple blows to her body and her head severely damaged. Her insides were spilled across the room. The extreme violence indicated that this was a crime of passion rather than a planned robbery. Blood spatter analysis revealed that the attacker had been standing very close to Cheyenne, suggesting a personal relationship. Although the weapon, likely a hammer, was missing from the scene, detectives carefully gathered forensic evidence as they worked through the case. They dusted for fingerprints, collected samples from the blood-soaked carpet, and looked for any signs of the murder weapon. Crime scene technicians also searched the surrounding rooms for clues, observing that the rest of the house appeared undisturbed. Meanwhile, Frank Robards, still in shock, was taken in for questioning. Frank's erratic behavior and his claim of a burglary quickly aroused the investigators' suspicions. However, lacking concrete evidence to connect him to the crime, the detectives realized they needed to broaden their search. The revelation of Cheyenne's pregnancy and the mystery surrounding the baby's father shifted the investigation in a new direction. Detectives now had multiple lives to consider and faced more questions than answers. The first person they approached was Frank Robards, Cheyenne's 48-year-old husband. Frank was a successful businessman, well known in the Buffalo area. However, at home, Frank had a much darker side. Investigators quickly discovered that he was controlling and emotionally distant, often treating Cheyenne and other women as mere objects. His sexist attitudes had surfaced repeatedly in his marriage, viewing Cheyenne as little more than a trophy wife whose role was to fulfill his sexual desires and uphold his public image as a family man. When Frank reported finding Cheyenne's body that morning, he stated he had just come back from an early business meeting with Chinese investors. However, detectives were skeptical. After investigating Frank's movements, they found out he hadn't been on a conference call at all. Instead, he had crossed the border into Ontario, Canada, where he spent the early hours at a strip club called Maple Bangers. His attempt to conceal his whereabouts raised immediate red flags for the investigators. Why would he lie about his activities? Detectives pressed Frank during the interrogation. At first, he remained calm, insisting he had no idea what had happened to his wife. However, as more details about his night out emerged, Frank grew defensive and began stumbling over his explanations. He maintained his innocence regarding Cheyenne's murder, but detectives could not overlook the inconsistencies in his story. Frank's controlling nature and the emotional distance he had created between himself and Cheyenne in the months following their wedding only heightened suspicions. Their marriage had grown cold, and he began to sense that Cheyenne was keeping secrets from him. He frequently voiced his concerns to friends about her ambitions and flirtatious behavior with other men, yet he never mentioned his own regular trips to strip clubs. Despite Frank's attempts to appear composed, detectives sensed there was more to his story. His falsehoods about his whereabouts that morning only strengthened the police's belief that he was involved, or, at the very least, had a motive to want Cheyenne dead. With no concrete evidence directly tying him to the crime yet, they persisted in their questioning, hoping he would make a mistake. However, while Frank was certainly suspicious, he wasn't ready to break under pressure just yet. The police next turned their attention to Diana Robards, Frank's first wife and Cheyenne's bitter rival. At 45, Diana had established a successful career as a real estate agent in Orchard Park, but her personal life had fallen apart 10 months earlier when she discovered Frank in bed with Cheyenne. That moment marked the end of her marriage, and Diana's jealousy had simmered ever since. The affair between Frank and Cheyenne became the talk of their social circle. Frank had been married to Diana for more than 20 years when he started his relationship with the much younger Cheyenne. Diana had suspected something was happening, but it wasn't until she walked in on them having sex in her own bedroom that the truth was revealed. The betrayal devastated her. She quickly filed for divorce, but her deep resentment toward Cheyenne lingered, as she blamed her for shattering her family and disrupting her life. In the days that followed, Diana's jealousy intensified. She couldn't bear to see Cheyenne living the life she once had, complete with the wealth and status. On one occasion, she confronted Cheyenne in a Target parking lot, shouting at her while brandishing a baseball bat. Though Diana didn't actually swing the bat, the message was unmistakable. She wanted Cheyenne to understand just how much she loathed her. Friends and neighbors had heard tales of Diana's growing fury, even though she typically maintained a composed and professional demeanor in public. When detectives questioned Diana about Cheyenne's murder, she remained calm yet defensive. She denied any involvement in Cheyenne's death, but her history with her former rival raised suspicions among investigators. Diana acknowledged her hatred for Cheyenne, but insisted she would never take it to the level of murder. Detectives questioned Diana about her whereabouts the night before the murder, but she claimed she had been home alone, leaving her with a weak alibi. Despite her composed demeanor during the interrogation, detectives felt that Diana's jealousy might have pushed her toward violence. Her previous threats and confrontations with Cheyenne positioned her as a significant suspect in the case. Despite the lack of physical evidence linking her to the crime scene, detectives pressed on in their search for answers. On September 18, 2015, just days after Cheyenne's body was discovered, Orchard Park police stumbled upon a shocking development that would alter the course of their investigation. It was a cool, overcast afternoon when officers, still combing through evidence, opted for a more thorough search of the backyard of the Robards' home. What they found revealed a disturbing truth. Buried just a few feet from the house, detectives uncovered a small plastic container filled with jewelry. Many of the items matched the descriptions of those reported missing from the crime scene, including a diamond bracelet that Frank had given Cheyenne on their wedding day. The jewelry had been removed from her bedroom to create the illusion that the murder was the result of a botched robbery. However, this new evidence indicated that the killer had made an effort to conceal the truth. In addition to the jewelry, police also discovered an iPhone wrapped in a plastic bag. When investigators accessed the phone, they were shocked by their findings. Among the messages and photos was a video and explicit recording of Cheyenne and her 19-year-old stepson, Dustin Robards, engaged in a sexual act. The date on the video indicated that the affair had been ongoing for months, well before Cheyenne's murder. As detectives assembled the information, it became evident that Cheyenne and Dustin had been involved in a clandestine relationship, which likely contributed significantly to the violent circumstances surrounding her death. However, the shocking revelations didn't end there. The most incriminating evidence emerged from the examiner's office. As police examined Cheyenne's autopsy report, they discovered that she was 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. Additional DNA testing revealed that the father of Cheyenne's unborn child was not Frank, as many had believed, but rather Dustin. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Dustin, who had previously been perceived as a shy college student living in the shadow of his influential father, suddenly became the focus of the inquiry. His clandestine relationship with Cheyenne and the revelation of his connection to her pregnancy raised significant questions about his potential involvement in her murder. Detectives began to question whether the weight of the secret relationship, along with the shocking news that Cheyenne was pregnant with his child, had driven Dustin to commit a terrible act. This discovery shifted the police's focus directly onto Dustin as they sought to uncover the complete story behind Cheyenne's death. At just 19 years old, Dustin had originally been viewed as an innocent participant in the investigation. Dustin, a college student, found himself overwhelmed by the turmoil following his stepmother's violent death. However, as the investigation progressed, unsettling aspects of his character came to light. It turned out that Dustin had been expelled from Michigan State University for stalking someone. In the months before Cheyenne's death, Dustin's behavior became increasingly unstable, drawing the attention of investigators. His expulsion from Michigan State was linked to a troubling pattern of actions. Following a messy breakup with an ex-girlfriend, who was also an English history professor, Dustin started stalking her, inundating her with countless obsessive texts and voicemails each day. Dustin's troubling behavior didn't go unnoticed by faculty at the university, with one incident involving him trailing a professor to her home. He was caught undressing and making unwanted advances toward her. This alarming conduct effectively ended his academic career, leaving him feeling lost and resentful. When Cheyenne came into his life, he quickly fixated on her, directing his unhealthy obsession toward her. What began as a few casual encounters quickly escalated into a troubling obsession. Police recovered phone records revealing that Dustin inundated Cheyenne with messages, sometimes sending her hundreds of texts and voicemails daily. The content varied wildly, shifting from expressions of love to frantic requests for her attention. Cheyenne's friends later informed the police that Dustin had turned possessive and controlling, even going so far as to shadow her during errands or outings with friends. Despite his alarming behavior, Cheyenne continued the relationship. Whether it was due to manipulation, guilt, or her complicated feelings for Dustin, she found herself trapped in this unhealthy and secretive affair. In the weeks before her death, Cheyenne had started to pull away from Dustin. She reportedly told him that their affair needed to end, especially with the risk of being discovered by his father. When the police questioned Dustin and disclosed that Cheyenne was pregnant with his child, his reaction was one of shock and denial. He initially dismissed the possibility, accusing the investigators of fabricating evidence to manipulate him. However, when faced with the DNA results, Dustin broke down in tears. Yet his emotional response did not appear to be one of genuine remorse. His reaction was one of anger. During the interrogation, Dustin slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "She was supposed to leave him for me." This outburst only heightened the detective's suspicions that his obsession may have pushed him to commit murder. As investigators delved deeper into Dustin's background, they began to suspect that his expulsion, stalking behavior, and obsessive nature could have driven him to murder Cheyenne in a desperate bid to keep her in his life. On the morning of September 24, 2015, as the sun rose over Orchard Park, New York, police made a significant breakthrough in the case of Cheyenne Robards' murder. After gathering evidence from the crime scene and interrogating various suspects, their attention turned to Dustin Robards, Cheyenne's 19-year-old stepson. The police had amassed sufficient evidence to conclude that Dustin was responsible for the brutal murder of Cheyenne, who had been bludgeoned to death in her own bedroom. Detectives dedicated hours to examining various pieces of evidence, including text messages, phone records, and the startling revelation that Dustin was the father of Cheyenne's unborn child. This discovery shed light on the motive behind the murder. Dustin was consumed by jealousy and rage when Cheyenne chose to end their affair. This decision struck him hard, as he had convinced himself that they were destined to be together. With this realization in mind, the detectives decided it was time to act. On that pivotal morning, a team of officers arrived at Dustin's college campus in a police cruiser. They found him sitting on a bench, absorbed in his phone. The officers approached him, declared their intentions, and placed him under arrest for the murder of Cheyenne Robards. Dustin, taken by surprise, looked shocked at first but quickly shifted to anger. "You've got to be kidding me. I didn't do anything," he shouted, his voice escalating as the officers began to read him his rights. As Dustin was escorted away in handcuffs, the reality of the situation started to hit him. He was surrounded by fellow students and faculty, many of whom had already heard rumors about Cheyenne's murder. Dustin's arrest reverberated throughout the campus community. Friends and acquaintances were left in shock, struggling to reconcile the charismatic young man they knew with the serious charges he faced. Meanwhile, Cheyenne's family, heartbroken by her loss, responded to the arrest with a blend of anger and relief. Cheyenne's family had long sensed that something was amiss in her relationship with Dustin. With his arrest, they could begin to confront their grief, knowing the individual responsible for her murder would be held accountable. While some family members were furious with Dustin, others felt a profound sadness, recognizing that this tragedy stemmed from a series of bad decisions and a toxic environment. Dustin Robards' arrest signaled a pivotal moment in the investigation as authorities geared up for the next phase of the trial. It commenced on December 1, 2015, at the Erie County Court in Buffalo, New York. The courtroom was filled with Cheyenne's family and friends, all anxious to witness justice for her horrific murder. The prosecution was headed by District Attorney Jane Millsbunker, a committed attorney in her late 40s with a reputation for her unwavering approach to crime. She portrayed Dustin as a deeply troubled young man whose jealousy and emotional volatility led him to murder Cheyenne. This was not merely a case of homicide, it was a tragic culmination of obsession and rage. It was an act of betrayal, Millsbunker stated, highlighting the complex dynamics of the relationship and Dustin's fixation on Cheyenne. Meanwhile, attorney Ivan Gornovich, 38, representing the defense, argued that Dustin had acted out of passion. He underscored Dustin's youth and the immense pressures he faced, including his recent expulsion from college for stalking. Gornovich contended that Dustin had been manipulated by Cheyenne, who had strung him along while concealing her affair with his father. He portrayed Dustin as a victim of his circumstances, aiming to elicit sympathy from the jury. Throughout the trial, Cheyenne's family occupied the courtroom, their emotions swinging between anger and deep sorrow. They listened intently as witnesses detailed the relationship between Cheyenne and Dustin, shedding light on the clandestine affair and Dustin's fixation on her. Each new revelation crashed over Cheyenne's loved ones like a fresh wave of heartbreak, making it difficult for them to comprehend the extent of the tragedy. After several days of testimony, the jury commenced deliberations on December 8, 2015. The following day, the jury delivered their verdict, finding Dustin Robards guilty of second-degree murder. This outcome brought a wave of relief to Cheyenne's family, who felt that justice had been achieved at last. However, they also faced the painful reality of the situation, struggling to come to terms with the fact that someone they once cared for was responsible for such a horrific crime. On January 20, 2016, Dustin was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The judge highlighted the importance of holding individuals accountable for domestic violence and emotional abuse. Cheyenne's family had mixed feelings about the sentence. Some thought it was too lenient, while others felt that no punishment could truly provide closure. In the weeks following the trial, her family tried to move forward, but the impact of her murder continued to weigh heavily on them. Cheyenne's friends were left to come to terms with the loss, remembering the lively woman they had cherished. In the community, the case highlighted the risks associated with toxic relationships, serving as a reminder that things are not always what they seem. Following Dustin Robards' sentencing to 25 years to life for Cheyenne Robards' murder, life in Orchard Park, New York, underwent a transformation for all those affected. Cheyenne's family shifted their focus toward healing and cherishing her memory, instead of getting caught up in the tragedy. In her memory, they created the Cheyenne Robards Foundation to assist women experiencing domestic abuse. The foundation focused on offering resources and education to help individuals identify unhealthy relationships, aiming to prevent tragedies similar to Cheyenne's. At the same time, Frank Robards, Cheyenne's husband, grappled with the repercussions of the trial. He stayed in Orchard Park but grew more isolated over time. The trial exposed his controlling tendencies, leading many in the community to regard him with suspicion. Friends began to pull away, worried about the repercussions of being associated with someone connected to such a horrific crime. Frank faced the dual burden of mourning his wife and the fact that he would be remembered as part of the tragedy. Local media reports indicated that he struggled with public perception and lost many friendships as a result. Meanwhile, Diana Robards, Frank's first wife, also faced her own challenges in the aftermath of the trial. The revelation of her husband's affair with Cheyenne left Diana feeling deeply betrayed and resentful. However, as time went on, she found some comfort in reconnecting with Frank. During the COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020, their conversations increased, allowing them to explore their shared history and gradually mend their relationship. They reminisced about their shared memories and talked about their children, which helped to mend the rift between them. By the summer of 2021, Frank and Diana made the decision to give their marriage another chance. They recognized that, despite the pain of the past, their feelings for each other had endured. In a small, intimate ceremony, they exchanged vows surrounded by only close family members. The couple hoped this new chapter would help them heal and move forward together. Meanwhile, Dustin remained in prison, where he had ample time to reflect on his actions and the consequences of his obsessive behavior. The weight of his choices hung heavily on him, serving as a constant reminder of the life he had shattered. Reports from inside suggest that Dustin grappled with the reality of his actions. At times he showed glimpses of remorse, yet his youthful arrogance frequently overshadowed any genuine regret he felt. Ultimately, the repercussions of Cheyenne's murder reverberated through Orchard Park and beyond, serving as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding love, betrayal, and the tragic outcomes of toxic relationships. The community continued to heal, motivated by the lessons learned from this heartbreaking case, as they work together to foster awareness and prevent similar tragedies in the future. And so concludes another tragic chapter in this true crime saga, a story woven with love, betrayal, and murder, where one family's darkest secrets culminated in a grisly and violent conclusion. As the community reflects on the lessons learned from this heartbreaking tale, they strive to ensure that such tragedies do not repeat themselves, honoring the memory of those lost and seeking justice for those affected.